Well, you are being sold a war in the Middle East right before your eyes. Just turn on CNN or Fox News. Heck, watch the debate last night to see how this CBS News framed what's about to happen. And this propaganda machine is working overtime right now. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is preparing for all-out war with Iran. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan just admitted the truth on national television. Watch.
This morning, the president said there would be severe consequences if Iran carried out this attack. What are those consequences, and are they more severe than sanctions?
Totally legitimate question, and that answer will come based on the conversations and consultations we have with our Israeli counterparts. It's too soon for me to stand before you today and give you an answer. What I can tell you is this. We are proud of the actions that we've taken alongside Israel to protect and defend Israel. We have made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make that the case. Thank you very much.
Well, that didn't sit too well with members of Congress. Congressman Thomas Massie just tweeted this moments ago. Work with Israel? Excuse me? The Constitution requires you work with Congress. Well, don't let the Constitution get in the way of your war. Someone who knows all about selling wars is Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector. He watched them try to manufacture a war with Iraq. He tweeted yesterday, Israel took up the sword. Israel shall now perish by the sword. Iran today proved Israel cannot defend itself, even with the full weight of the United States behind it. Any Israeli retaliation, it will result in greater destruction until Israel is no more. And former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter joins us now. Scott, good to see you.
Good to be here.
Do you believe they're manufacturing this war despite evidence to the contrary about what's actually happening right now? I mean, you see all the major networks, the propaganda machine went into overdrive yesterday, whether you were watching CNN or Fox News, they're all on the same page. And the Biden administration seems to be on the same page. Is that where we're headed?
Well, I actually think they're trying to manufacture the peace. You see, they can't be honest about what happened. What happened is that Iran, hit Israel with an unprecedented level of precision violence. Israel has never been struck in this manner in its history. No nation has. No nation has absorbed 180 plus modern ballistic missiles impacting on its soil with great precision. I think, that fact right there, there's a reason why Benjamin Netanyahu's voice was shaky and his hands were shaking when he was issuing his response in the aftermath of the strike, because he knows the truth, that Iran can reach out and touch any place in Israel anytime it wants with as much violence as it wants to put on it. Iran this time struck purely military targets, and they were struck in a way not to kill people, but to send the signal of destruction. And that signal was sent. Ask any Israeli soldier that watched those Iranian missiles come in unimpeded, impacting on the most sensitive military sites in Israel. They know what the truth is. Everybody knows what the truth is. But you see, if you acknowledge that, if you acknowledge the fact that Israeli emperor has no clothes when it comes to self-defense, this creates an extremely destabilizing new reality in the Middle East, one that could prompt an escalation as Israel seeks to restore some sort of deterrence posture, a viable deterrence posture. And this might mean relying on its nuclear weapons capability. That's the last thing the United States wants. So the first thing that came out, it happened immediately. This attack was a failure. Well, I mean, you can't hide the what we saw take place. It's not a failure, but it's spun as a failure. That the missile defense.
Let me play this for you, because this was during the debate last night. And almost immediately, we were, right after this was happening and on our show yesterday, we were highlighting all of the responses from the Biden administration, the Fox News responses. They were all saying, this was a miserable failure. It just goes to show you the strength of the United States in its support of Israel, Israel's Arrow system, its Iron Dome system, that it shot down these missiles and ballistic missiles. And then during the debate last night, here was Margaret Brennan in her very first question, just making a statement that's a total lie. Watch this.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action.
So she comes right out and says it was a failure thanks to the United States and joint Israeli response. I mean, what is she? To me, it was pure propaganda.
Well, I mean, we've long known that the mainstream media doesn't serve a journalistic function. They serve as stenographers for the government. And she was simply putting out the message of the U.S. government, of the Israeli government. Let's remember, we knew this attack was coming. No, Iran didn't pick up the phone and call us, but the Iranians aren't stupid. They're actually some of the smartest people in the world today. They made sure that their missiles were observable by American reconnaissance, so that the American reconnaissance could notify the Israelis, so that the Israelis could, A, get their personnel in the bunkers and get their high-value assets off the ground. You know, I think we need to be careful about some of the reporting coming out about 20 F-35s destroyed, et cetera. Unless an F-35 was a hangar queen, meaning it couldn't take off because of maintenance. I believe that all functioning F-35s, all functioning F-15Is were off the ground in the air, preserving those resources because the Israelis knew what was about to happen. They knew that these critical airfields were about to be saturated with missiles they couldn't intercept. But the other thing that happened here is, how do you absorb this and not be compelled to undertake an immediate violent reaction? Well, you have to minimize what has just happened. The Biden administration can't afford a war. Understand, they literally have the perfect storm of economic crises unfolding as we speak. We have a hurricane that the Biden administration has just fumbled the response to. And there are many Americans right now saying, why isn't there more money for these people in Western North Carolina while you're sending billions off to Israel and Ukraine? We have a longshoreman strike right now on the East Coast that's going to paralyze the American economy if it's not resolved soon. And again, people are going to ask the question, where is the Biden administration in all this? And by extension, both these questions automatically bring up, where is Kamala Harris? Where is the Harris campaign? Where is the heir apparent in all of this? This is devastating for the Harris campaign. They may be able to resolve each one of these with a more focused effort on hurricane response, maybe some sort of negotiated into the longshoreman strike before the holiday season kicks in. But I just want to point out, 1992, Bill Clinton's campaign, James Carville's famous sticker on the door, it's the economy, stupid. This election will be won and lost because of the economy. And right now the economy is ready to tank. So the last thing you need now is the United States and Israel to do a retaliation against Iran that could provoke a regional war that would shut down Middle East oil supplies right on the eve of winter, create a global energy crisis that would cause immediate spikes in the price of gasoline at the pump, oil in the tanks before we have to heat our houses before winter. This would be the end of the Biden administration, the end of the aspirations of any Harris administration. It would be the death of the Democratic Party. So when Jake Sullivan says we're working with the Israelis on a response, it's not that the United States is sitting there saying, okay, let's bomb this, let's bomb that, let's bomb this, let's bomb that. This is a political game. The United States is working with Israel on how to ensure that they don't go rushing up the escalation ladder in an uncontrolled fashion into a war. What can Israel do that prevents a broader war? Israel needs to respond. They have no choice. I think Iran understands this. The question is, what will Israel do if they respond in a precipitous manner, striking nuclear infrastructure or oil production, gas production? Iran has no choice but to bring the hammer down. And everything we just saw will be repeated over and over and over again until Israel is no more. Take up the sword, die by the sword. Israel knows this. They understand this. So does the United States. So does Iran. So Israel, I think, with American assistance, is going to carry out a limited strike, and then diplomatic pressure is going to be put on Iran to not overreact, to bring an end to this. For instance, we know that prior to this, the Iranian president, while he was in New York as part of the General Assembly, debate at the United Nations talked about renewing diplomatic engagement with the United States over reviving the JCPOA. The United States could very well come in and say, yes, we're ready. We're ready to do that. We're ready to sit down. We're ready to do that, to have diplomatic engagement with the Iranians if Iran doesn't overreact to what Israel must do, because Israel must strike back in a way that preserves the facade of Israeli deterrence. But the bottom line is this: beyond the PR campaign, everybody who's anybody in the international security business understands exactly what happened yesterday. Iran proved that Israel cannot defend itself, even with the assistance of the United States, that Israel is a sitting duck. And the moment Iran decides to fire even larger quantities of missiles at Israel, Israel will cease to exist as a modern nation state. That is the reality. That's what happened yesterday. And that outcome is so terrible that nobody can admit it.
Yeah, and they're not admitting it on national television. And of course, you see all of the people across all of the major networks saying that nothing happened, no damage, no issue, no problem. The might of the Israeli Iron Dome and Arrow system and the United States prevented wide-scale destruction. But that seems to be not at all what happened. Before I want to ask you about the response a little bit more in detail here, but what's your assessment from your sources on how devastating this attack actually was? You heard Margaret Brennan lying to the American people, and my sources pointing out a number of different strikes that hit very important infrastructure. What are your sources telling you? I mean, we have 181 ballistic missiles. Iran says about 90% of them hit their target. We can't verify that, of course. But what were you able to verify through your sources?
Well, again, my sources are very limited to some phone calls with people in Iran and to spending hours looking at the videos. The Iranian government has released a target list, and the video data seems to back up the fact that two major air bases, Nevatim in the south where the F-35s are, and another one further north where the F-15Is are, were struck by a significant number of missiles in a simultaneous attack that was designed to overwhelm any air defense. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand, the reality of what happened there. You don't have that many missiles hit at the same time with that destructive capacity without inflicting serious harm on a facility. And I do want to remind people, in case you're wondering about the accuracy of these systems, Iran fired a dozen missiles against the Al-Assad air base back in 2020 after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And they hit pinpoint precision every bunker they were aiming at on that base. This is the accuracy of the system. So I think once we get satellite imagery, if we get at satellite imagery, you're going to see that there were pinpoint attacks on hangars, on support facilities, etc. But again, because Israel had at least 2 hours to prepare for this, and there are things that can be done when you look at where the missiles are being launched from. You can do predictive analysis of the arc, the range arcs, etc. The Israelis had a good idea what targets were vulnerable for attack, and I believe they took the appropriate measures to eliminate casualties. And this was Iran's goal and objective. There were a couple places, I believe, some of the radar facilities and some of the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 missile defense facilities were hit without warning, meaning there were no sirens that came into play because they used advanced systems, maybe the Fatah 2, that came in and struck these facilities without warning, destroying them. Israel won't admit this. There may have been casualties there. We don't know. But on the air bases, I would be surprised if there were any casualties in terms of manpower losses, because there was no reason for there to be. You had plenty of time to get people out into the bunkers. Israel wasn't looking to inflict human cost. Iran wasn't looking to inflict a human cost on Israel, unlike the Israelis, which killed over 1,000 Lebanese civilians in their collective punishment of Beirut for Hezbollah's actions. Iran wasn't seeking civilian casualties. They were seeking to prove the point. We can hit you anytime, any place with as much destructive power as we want. You can't stop us.
Which brings me to the response now. And you mentioned that Israel will have to respond. And of course, if you watched mainstream media yesterday, all over, you had former generals on TV. Everyone's saying Israel has to strike back and annihilate Iran. They have to go after their oil and gas infrastructure. They have to go after their nuclear infrastructure. These were common themes all across the airwaves yesterday, that they need to wipe Iran off the map. Oil and gas, and then we've seen videos of Iranians in long lines filling up their cars because of what might happen to the oil infrastructure. What do you think the response will be, and what joint response from the United States and Israel on targeting? Would just something small and we go to the table for peace talks?
Well, I don't believe it'll involve Iran's nuclear infrastructure, because this is a existential Iranian capability. And if you attack this, then Iran will have no choice but to threaten Israel's existential survival. Plus, an attack against a nuclear facility, especially a reactor or place that has nuclear fuel that could lead to contamination, it opens the door for Iran to retaliate by striking Dimona. And nobody wants that. So I hope that calmer heads prevail. To strike Iran's energy infrastructure, this will immediately result in Iran destroying regional energy production capacity: Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain. And Iran will destroy it in a way that it won't be able to recover, not for decades. And that's the end of the global economy. So again, I would hope that the Biden administration would weigh in on that and say no. Look, the Iranians, again, by choosing the weapon system they chose, I think they defined the target deck for the United States and for Israel. I think that the bombing of a missile production facility, maybe one near Tehran, so the explosions could be seen in Tehran, sending a signal, would be sufficient. It's something that Iran could easily recover from. It doesn't cause permanent damage, but it's something that Israel could say, see, look what we can do. And that might be something the United States would work on. Now, here's the interesting part, though. The idea that this can happen automatically without consequence is absurd. Israel will take great risks going in to do this. There's a chance Israeli aircraft could be shot down. Russia has deployed S-400 systems into Iran. These systems are probably manned by Russian soldiers because Iran hasn't had time to train up on this. Russia is reportedly to have sent advanced Su-35 fighters into Iran. Again, the Iranians aren't competent in the operation of this aircraft. There's a good chance that Russians will be flying these aircraft, which means that if Israeli aircraft enter Iranian space, we have a chance for an Israeli versus Russian standoff. People say, well, how could that? Well, it happened. Look at Vietnam. Look at Korea. Russian pilots flying North Vietnamese and Korean aircraft. Look at Egypt against Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Russian pilots flying Egyptian aircraft. That's the situation we face here. And again, this is where the United States might come in and tell Russia, look, this is a face-saving gesture. You got to let it go through. Tell the Iranians this is it. There will be nothing else. We'll get back to leveling off. This is where I think the United States is coming in. So, Jake Sullivan's not lying when he's saying America's working with the Israelis, but it's designed to make America look tough. What America is really doing is an act of desperation, trying to prevent this conflict from spinning out of control because of the devastating economic and political consequences it will have for the United States. And it's in Russia's interest, by the way. I just want to point this out. People say, well, why would Russia do that? Well, at the end of this month, Russia's hosting the BRICS summit.
Right.
One way to sink the BRICS summit is to throw the world into a global energy security-driven economic crisis, where everybody's talking about peace in the Middle East and nobody's talking about the new BRICS infrastructures that Russia's trying to put in place. So Russia has a vested interest in trying to get this thing nipped in the bud. And if the United States came forward with a reasonable face-saving gesture that would get Israel to back down, Russia might be able to make some phone calls. Remember, the Russian prime minister visited Iran right before this happened. Shoigu, the former defense minister, was there. There's another delegation there right now. Russia is definitely engaged with Iran, trying to ensure that what happens here doesn't spin out of control.
Right. And Iran just joined BRICS in January of this year. So Iran is now a new member of the BRICS, along with Egypt, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia is in the process of it as well. So the sort of new world order rising, there would be a major setback for them. Great point. Well, tensions are very high right now all across the region. 34 days right now until Election Day in the United States, and things could not be worse what the United States is facing right now economically. And so all eyes on what's happening here. Scott Ritter, thank you so much, as always, for joining us and providing some semblance of or cutting through the propaganda, I should say, because people are being spoon-fed a massive amount of it right now with the corporate media. So thanks for your perspective, as always.
Thank you.